I'm Bill Evans, and this is episode 7 of Thoughts from a Tolerant Man. I want to return for a moment to my cross-country bicycle trip, the journey that provided much of the structure for my book. Along the way, I relied on both physical and electronic maps. My iPad and iPhone could show me just about anything I needed, from the full scope of the trip to my exact location at any given moment. But in the end, it was the physical maps I relied on most. The southern route from California to Florida was laid out across about 10 separate maps. They told me how far it was to water, where I could find food or a place to sleep, and even where the nearest bicycle repair shop might be. When I taught history, maps were one of my most important tools. If you'll indulge me for a moment, I'd like to step back into that role and help you appreciate something about maps. Please take a look at this one. This is the route I followed across the United States. Every one of those points represents a photo I took with my iPhone. While I was following a carefully mapped route, with those pictures I was also illustrating my own. One of my favorite historical examples comes from two Portuguese explorers, Bartolomeu and Vasco da Gama. Together, their voyages proved that a sea route from Europe around Africa was possible. Diaz sailed from Portugal in 1487, traveling down the west coast of Africa. Please take a look at this map. With the red line, you can see how closely he stayed to the coastline. He had to. He was sailing into waters no European had ever navigated before. Eventually, storms pushed his ships far to the south, and he was to realize he had rounded the tip of Africa, what we now call the Cape of Good Hope. That alone was a remarkable achievement, but he turned back. The important thing was this: he had proven that the route was possible, and that knowledge changed everything. Let's look back at the map again. About 10 years later, Vasco da Gama built on what Diaz had learned. If you look at the black line, you'll notice something immediately. He doesn't need to stay as close to the coast in the early part of his journey. He already knows what lies ahead. But once he reaches the southern tip of Africa, he again enters unfamiliar territory. Now again, he hugs the coastline carefully until he reaches a point where he makes a remarkable decision. He turns away from land and sails out into the open ocean, trusting his instruments and his understanding of where India should be. It was a bold and dangerous move, and it worked. I would suggest that moment required as much courage, perhaps even more, than the first journey to the moon. Astronauts had the benefit of centuries of accumulated science. They knew where they were going. They knew how long it would take. And they had a team on Earth monitoring every second. Da Gama had none of that certainty. One of the great lessons here is that each explorer made possible the journeys that followed. Knowledge was built step by step. The same thing was true in a much smaller way on my bicycle trip. The maps I used included notes from other cyclists, little updates about things they had discovered along the way. Over time, those notes became part of the official maps used by everyone. When I had to make detours because of fires or flooding, I shared what I learned as well. I wasn't exploring new territory, but in my own small way, I felt I connected to that same process. Every journey, whether across a continent, around the world, or even through life, builds on what came before. And that's a thought from a tolerant man.